So Sarper, thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it. It's always good to talk to you, especially the head of research and development here at Airties. Don't get a chance very often to speak with you. I know you've been extremely busy, these past few months, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Give you a chance to kind of toot your own horn, as we say here, right, about the things that you've been working on, because we're all really excited about it. And I think it's important that, we first kind of take a more simple approach, right? I'll ask you to take your PhD hat off for a minute and speak to us as laymen here in the industry. But you've been doing a lot of work here recently with a working group in the WBA on this new architecture and framework called operator managed Wi-Fi. And so what I wanted to do today was give you an opportunity to talk a little bit more about what it is. And so let's kind of first frame this and make sure we're all on the same page. And I'll ask you the question, can you, in your words, define what operator managed Wi-Fi is to you and obviously to the WBA that's been working on this?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this great introduction, Scott. So basically, operator managed Wi-Fi is a Wi-Fi service managed by the operator. It's that simple. So operator managed Wi-Fi is when the broadband provider, it's usually cable or telco, extends their service beyond their router or gateway in each subscriber's home to ensure that their customers get the best connectivity experience right down to the device in their hands, their laptop or TV or whatever device they're using in their home. And the majority of consumers want their internet service provider to manage their in-home Wi-Fi, and they see it as inseparable from their broadband service.
So when you think of it in that terms and in those contexts of operator managed Wi-Fi, how does this new WBA open managed Wi-Fi architecture fit into this business model?
Yeah, that's a good point. So operator managed Wi-Fi has been around for a while, so it's not something new, but there are a multitude of different protocols and standards, and there are different ways of implementing this operator managed Wi-Fi. And it's like reinventing the wheel in every implementation. And the aim of the operator managed Wi-Fi work group that we are having in WBA is to look at all the options available and to come up with a set of recommended options that would give a fundamental or baseline reference architecture based on the latest, greatest, best technology and open standards available across the industry.
You said a couple of things, and I just made a note that stuck out in my mind. Number one, standards-based. I think that's really important. And then two, the wheel reinvention. And I think we'll get to that a little bit later in the presentation, because I also think that's very important in terms of Airties and some of the struggles we have and why this is important for us as well in terms of what we want to focus on as a business. So let's talk a little bit about the standards piece of this, because the term standards in our industry, as you know, gets thrown around very loosely. Certain companies and businesses claim standards-based implementations. What I want to understand from you is when we speak of standards at Airties, what are those organizations and standards that you specifically reference here that we're building this framework around?
That's a good question. So this operator managed Wi-Fi initiative is driven by the Wireless Broadband Alliance to start with, and the Wireless Broadband Alliance, WBA, works to advance Wi-Fi related initiatives across the industry. So it's an industry body that involves the operators, main operators and the vendors. And within this WBA, a work group had been set up to identify an end-to-end reference architecture for residential networks. And I had the pleasure of leading over the past 1.5 years this group. And this specification that we had in operator managed reference architecture is based on industry standards from the bodies such as Wi-Fi Alliance and the Broadband Forum. And from the Wi-Fi Alliance, we basically use the Easy Mesh standard, the data elements, and also we have the optimized connectivity experience. And from Broadband Forum, we have the TR-181 data model, and also we have the user services platform, in other words, TR-369 and also TR-069. But I can say that the strength of both the work group and the operator managed reference architecture itself is that it really is a cross-industry effort. to start with the working group, we were approximately 60 people involved in this group, with representatives from telcos, operators, Wi-Fi solutions providers, technology vendors, chipset vendors, OEMs. And these experts from different parts of the industry represent a high level of experience in the field.
Oh.
And they work together to make a neutral evaluation of the different technology standards, as well as the various approaches to residential network management. And this covers the technologies that have been developed over the past years. So there's a vast majority of experience in this field coming from these different people joining this work group.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So the takeaway I would say is, one, these are standards bodies that if you have been working in the telecommunications industry for the last 10, 20, 30 years, they're very familiar to you. You've probably in some way, shape, or form implemented some of these standards into your network already, and you've been actively involved in utilizing their technologies. So I think that's really important, right? These are not newly created standards, if you will, by one or two large operators or vendors or players in the space, but it's really leveraging existing innovation standards bodies that are already in use today. So yeah, very important, I think. You also mentioned the importance of who are in these bodies, right? You know, one of the things we certainly hear in the sales and product field as we talk to customers is, yeah, I'd love to be in this space, but the pace of innovation and adoption of technologies is so fast, I can't keep up with it. When you have a body that is incorporating not just operators, not just hardware vendors, but software players, consumer electronics manufacturers, all that are involved in this technology, I think that helps a lot because it brings in a wider range of voices and positions of industry and business that are important in understanding how these standards need to move forward. So I think that's a really important piece that we certainly hear from the field, from customers, that they want to know that when these standards are being implemented, the full picture is being considered as it relates to this technology, and not just one or two players or specific interests of those players that are being implemented. So I think that's really important. That's good to know. Excellent.
So you're right. There are different standards, and they are addressing different points in the industry. But the essential idea here was to identify a reference architecture that addresses the full end-to-end solution. So because the operator and the customer wants to have the end-to-end solution, right? They don't want to. They are not interested in single solution only addressing one part of the problem itself. So here, what we have done is, rather than dealing with disparate elements of the end-to-end solution, the essential idea was to see how a residential network should function, what mechanisms are used for data collection or device management, what protocol to use for communication between the home router and the cloud, what is the minimum feature set relating to remote network management, mesh formation, and so on. So we carefully identified the best of each of the different parts and combined them in a complete end-to-end specification that takes the guesswork out of defining how a residential network should be built. So you know that the TR-181 addresses the data models, TR-369 addresses how a remote management should be handled from cloud, and Wi-Fi Alliance Easy Mesh addresses the mesh formation and how you set up your mesh network. When you consider this in an end-to-end solution perspective, there is a need to combine these standards in a single end-to-end solution. We call it an operator managed reference architecture, so that the operator can get what he is looking for, and the customer is happy with the solution that it gets. And it can be reusable, so that you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you need to implement it in a new gateway or a router. And you have the building blocks, and you put them in the same device and improve the quality of experience for the customer.
Now that makes sense. So that you you raise a really good point, and I want to make sure everybody, the audience, understands that one of the things that we see certainly in the field is that these standards bodies have all been really kind of operating as islands unto themselves, focused on device management, telemetry, driver interactions at the controller level, et cetera, right? And while that's important and it's good, it doesn't take into consideration the operator's pain points, which are, how do I make all of these pieces work together in a unified manner? So that when I make one change in this particular implementation, I don't have to go and re-engineer things across 3 or 4 other pieces of my network architecture. So the work that we've really done with the WBA is to say, okay, let's take these standards and let's stitch together a single fabric. And so that everyone now, it's not just to say we've put this overlapping or overlay of a new fabric, it's really to say the entire standards bodies are now going to work together in a common structure. And so that if we all agree to this common structure, each of those standards bodies now will be thinking about their particular work as it relates to the overarching architecture for operator managed Wi-Fi. And so I think for the operator, what we should then be seeing is a much faster pace of innovation, right? A better understanding is that when they talk to one particular operator who's maybe doing ACS device management, or another one who's doing microservices in the cloud or an embedded firmware as it relates to Wi-Fi, they're all following a similar common roadmap and theme because all these bodies upon which they're working with are working to the same common operator managed Wi-Fi framework. So I think this is it's really fascinating in terms of what you guys have done here. I think it's going to really change the game for sure from an operator standpoint.
So Scott, I know you have some thoughts on why this reference architecture is valuable, and you have described it very clearly. And why Airties has supported this cross-industry initiative? Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, from my perspective and from where I sit with the operators and the conversations we have, I think it's 2 pieces for us. One is it's internal, right? Which is, I'm the front-facing individual with the operator when they've selected our technology to start the implementation process. And we'd love to say that this is a simple exercise. We spend 4 to 6 weeks in integration of our controller and away we go. And the reality is it's not that easy, right? And you're bringing in, an OEM on hardware, you may be bringing in a separate vendor on software, an integration partner that's combining all of those things together. You may have some previous partners who you've worked with in the past at Airties who understand how things work, others that don't, people who change in organizations. And so that program becomes incredibly complex. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that our technology is integrated into that controller itself. And so one of the things that I certainly see that's come out of the conversations I've had with my operator customers is that if we can simplify not touching that controller so much and really moving your innovation into a separate modular component where I need it, right? Whether I need it in the cloud or whether I need it in embedded software, that would really make my life a lot simpler. It makes it a lot simpler for us, right? Because now guys like you who are sitting there trying to think about where we want to be and where will Wi-Fi be in the next 5 to 10 years, you're not spending your time worrying about the underlying architecture to just get that technology into a software stack, right? Now you can remove that from the equation, let the standards bodies deal with it. You focus on innovating. I think too, it's really important for the operator because we believe, and the reason we're supporting all these open standards is that we don't believe the success of us will be measured, nor the operator, by a proprietary solution and by locking someone into something that they're stuck with, right? We believe that competition is important in this space. We want to see more people to come in and to innovate, to challenge us, for us to challenge others, and say that let's not create a framework that blocks innovation. Let's allow the framework to embrace innovation and let us all compete for the best technologies and simplify that. And so when an operator can basically say, okay, I want to compare you to 3 or 4 different channel management solutions. It's just now a matter of a microservice. And maybe an operator says, I really don't like all of my technology sitting in a cloud. Cloud's becoming very expensive. My bills for AWS grow month by month by month. I've got all this compute power and storage capability at the endpoint by my customer. Why can't I leverage that? So being able to give that flexibility and developing technologies that can be embedded in microservices in the embedded side, as well as the cloud side, and allowing the operator to make that decision, I think is incredibly powerful for the operator. So, I certainly see both sides of the coin. I see it from our side as a company trying to implement these technologies, in particular large tier ones and tier twos, but also the operator as well, who certainly over the last, I would say, 4 years or so, every operator has seen how valuable managed Wi-Fi can be for them, right? It's a great revenue generator. It gives an operator a revenue stream in a business that's really competitive from a cost perspective. It has been historically just a commodity business and driving to the bottom, lowest common denominator. This is a real new opportunity, but it also gives the opportunity for the operator to now better own and control their network, right? Because that piece of the network inside the home, both Wi-Fi and connected devices, is so critical to the overall quality of experience, but it's been something historically the operator just has not had control of. This gives them the ability to control more of that. And so from an innovation perspective, it helps tremendously for them to be able to continue to maintain a pace of innovation that tracks with the industry with 6, 6E, and 7 as we continue on. But it also gives them the ability to better own the experience and the network themselves inside the house to deliver a generally overall better quality of experience.
While we were saying this, reinventing the wheel, we were saying that the baseline architecture that you put on your value-added services too. So here what we say is that you don't spend your time and effort and your money on the basic requirements that the hardware platform and the service should provide, because we are defining the requirements for that and the reference standards that should be used within this operator managed Wi-Fi. Then you put on your value-added services, and you don't worry about the upcoming standards, because the reference architecture will be able to cope up with that and will provide the necessary APIs for your services to use. So when you provide that baseline architecture, the vendors like us, the software solution providers and management providers, can focus on the value-added services and bring in the value that we are looking for. Right?
Absolutely. And I'll say you hit it right on the head, because the other piece to this, which is to your point, those value-added services. So they see the value in managed Wi-Fi and owning the customer home experience, and then they see the additional services they can deploy. But what they struggle with is, well, even those spaces change and evolve, and they evolve rapidly. We can look at IoT and where things have moved from Zigbee to Thread, right? We can look at parental control solutions and the various players in that space. But because the architectural framework of the embedded software stack is so, well, I would call monolithic and difficult, it almost requires the operator to make this bet for the next 5+ years for one particular solution, because the ability to actually integrate other technologies is so difficult, so time consuming, so cost consuming, that it's just not an option. So being able to do this and create this framework to allow competition even in those value-added spaces and parental control and other services like IoT, I think is going to be revolutionary, as well as really help to move those areas forward too. Because if you think about it, those value-added services are driven by the operators who implement those. If you can get more operators implementing those value-added services, you see a greater pace of innovation and movement in those particular spaces as well. You'll see more players come into the space that historically have not been able to, because it's been effectively a closed business. So that's a very good point on the value-added services.
Yeah. And also the one thing that enables this value-added services and this reference architecture is being able to use the standards that are available, right? Using the latest standards gives us flexibility, and we know that we can know what everybody is doing and implementing, right? It's different from using an open source solution. It's a open standard solution, which means that there's a written document that explains how things are being done, and you agree on the terms and conditions and the requirements of that standard, which gives an agreement to all the industry body, so that you are sure about what to expect from the software that you are using and the architecture that you are using. So this is different from the open source without the standard implementation. When you have the standard like TR181, TR369, Wi-Fi alliances, easy mesh, data elements. It gives an indication of what is the baseline requirement from the platform that you're using, right? So, and you expect what can work. And this gives you flexibility in focusing on the value-added services rather than the implementation details.
Yep, for sure. Well, we certainly hope everybody watching this has been able to take away something of value. We look forward to hopefully keep your eye out for more of these coming in the near future. Sarper, if somebody wanted to learn a little bit more, dive into more of the details technically, architecturally, where would they want to go? How would they go about doing that?
Okay, so there are two good resources to learn from to start with. We are providing info on this report, the white paper, with a link to download the white paper, and more on our website at airties.com. And also, people can also visit the resources page of the Wireless Broadband Alliance at wballiance.com. So these are the two main sources to learn more from. And I suggest that they follow our work group in the next phases that we are working on.
Excellent. Well, Sarper, thank you very much for your time. I know you're busy. I will let you put your PhD hat back on and get back to work. But thank you again for your time, and look forward to seeing you here soon. Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.